I'm Rebecca Merson. I am a faculty member in the biology department at Rhode Island College. I'm particularly interested in environmental toxins and environmental chemicals and how they affect apex predators, specifically sharks and rays. I'm interested in seeing habitats that are thought to be pretty remote, far away from any kind of man-made material input. The Maldives have been on my radar for more than a decade. I didn't know a lot about it except that it was remote. It was in the Arabian Sea, pretty close to Sri Lanka and southern India. The Maldives themselves are an island chain of, it's actually atolls, and the atolls are extinct volcanoes that over time had built up into coral reefs and into many islands. There's approximately 1,200 islands, and of those only about 250 of them are inhabited. So this would be an area of the world that's accessible but yet remote. So I was hoping to see areas, underwater habitat that was pristine, not impacted by environmental degradation, such as just even physical pollution, development, as well as chemical pollution. This was a trip of a lifetime for me. Some people have bucket lists. This is one place on my bucket list. But it was also a chance for me to send my son off to college. He had just graduated from high school, and he was about to go off to study natural resources management up at the University of Vermont. So this trip was really my way of just trying to connect with him before he left. I always wanted to go and explore, and it turns out that my grandmother had left me a little bit of money, and that was how we were able to fund the trip. I did sign up through a dive shop, and so the entire trip was arranged. We had to arrange our own flights, but other than that, we were living on a live-aboard boat, the Mantheory. We were a total of 11 divers from all different backgrounds and areas of the world. I recall even the earliest dives, just seeing the sheer diversity of fishes. I mean, not just fishes, but even in the invertebrates, other life in the water. A few fun early events were the unicorn fish swim around us. They would get pretty close. They're pretty large fish, and would swim in and out of the divers' exhalation bubbles. So it was and they seemed to be having sort of a playtime, or having fun with the divers' bubbles. Beautiful fish, just the colors, incredible. So that's That's one real vivid memory. The batfish was also a large fish that would come very close to divers in groups of 3 or 4 or 5 fish, and just hang around, wondering or curious, maybe perhaps looking for a handout. We did a night dive. That night dive, we knew we were going to see sharks. And it turned out we saw well over 100 nurse sharks. The dive team, which included a dive master who was native to the Maldives, Maldivian, he had been running dive trips for more than 20 years. So he had this familiarity with areas and could predict what we would see in those areas. And so certainly it came to fruition. He said that we're doing a night dive and we're going to see a lot of sharks. And we did. They were just amazing. So these are the types of sharks that don't have to swim continuously to ventilate their gills. So some of them would actually settle down on the ocean floor right next to us, and we could just reach out, and it was pretty amazing. We had flashlights, underwater flashlights, so we were able to kind of look around, and we were pretty inundated with those sharks. It was really wonderful to see so many sharks in one place at one time, and that's a pretty rare sight. Other parts of the trip, we saw one whale shark underwater, and of course we tried to keep up with it. Although it looked like it was moving slowly, it actually made way through the water pretty quick, so we couldn't keep up with it. So we have very little footage of it, but it was certainly a great experience to see that. So here's a model of a whale shark, and whale sharks are part of a group of sharks known as carpet sharks or erectolobiforms. And being the largest fish, cartilaginous fish in the ocean, they actually eat the smallest things. They eat plankton. So they go through the water with their mouth open and strain plankton and then eat that plankton. Now they have 2 dorsal fins, a pretty large dorsal fin and a second dorsal fin. The particular whale shark that we saw on this trip, the dorsal fin had a large notch taken out of it. And so we suspect, but though we don't know, it could have been an injury sustained from a boat strike. That could be one cause of that injury. I'm planning to put together a proposal to go back to the Maldives and get a sense of what kinds of chemical burdens these animals are carrying. Now, we know that we can measure hormones, we can measure other kinds of biological molecules just by sampling the slime. That is a protective coating of mucus on the outside of these animals, sharks and fish. We can collect DNA from a swab of this mucus. So one of my goals is to be able to develop a way to sample that mucus and try to gauge whether there are particular chemicals that are residing in the body of that animal. So being as least impact, very non-invasive sampling, basically we would hang around a cleaning station, I can tell you what that is later, and use a long reach pole with a small sampling device at the end, which would probably entail a small kind of a swab type of a material that would basically just swab off a little bit of the mucus, and then we would save that. Cleaning stations are really interesting. They are areas that may be specific locations where aquatic animals come to visit. They are cleaned by the associated fish. They will have any external parasites removed. These could be around the mouth or sometimes in the mouth. It's interesting to see a shark with its mouth open and a fish swimming in and out of its mouth. But these places are good hotspots for being able to observe the manta rays and others, and potentially areas we can visit and be able to collect samples. When we go out in the field and sample, we're going to be collecting basically slime from the external part of the ray or the shark, and we'll collect it. It'll be placed in tubes. Those tubes will be brought back with us, and some analysis will be done on the slime. We know that from other studies, DNA can be isolated from that slime and used actually to do genetics and population studies, and that may be pretty interesting. Part of my goal is to have an idea of how much contamination these animals are carrying around in them. So with that slime, I'm hoping to be able to analyze metabolites from the animal. So a metabolite is basically a molecule that the animal has taken up through its food or through other ways of absorption. That animal will actually biotransform it using its own metabolic processes and then excrete it. So excretion can happen through urine or feces, but also potentially through sweat or, in this case, slime. So the kinds of chemical pollution I'm interested in are long-lived. These compounds are produced by incineration. They're produced as byproducts of other production or used as pesticides, and they enter the environment, and they are very resistant to environmental degradation. So light doesn't break them down, water, heat, they just basically stay there in their original form. And there are many places on Earth that are extremely remote. However, those chemicals have been detected in those areas. For example, the Arctic. And in some of those areas, the animals have very high body burdens of those chemicals. So the Maldives is a country, and it's the lowest country in the world. In fact, the average altitude for these islands is 1.5 meters above sea level. We are looking at a country with projected rising ocean to potentially be lost. So I know the Maldivians have already thought about their future in how they'll be affected by global climate change and subsequent sea level rise. They've already begun some construction projects to either raise up their altitude or to put in barriers to protect certain oceanside property. However, it would be a great undertaking for that country to be able to afford or have the means to protect all of their inhabited islands from sea level rise. So this is really of concern. The work I do seems like it's all gloom and doom. It's not. It's terribly interesting how organisms can adapt to their environment, whatever is in their environment. There is hope. We, as I said, there are agencies that are working to really understand the processes and how we could reverse them. So there are places like the Maldives and other areas that are just incredibly beautiful, and we would like to keep them that way. I'd like to go back and visit and wholeheartedly support grassroots efforts to make our environment better. Another part of this is education. Not just our college students that come here and work with us on the research, but public education as well, being able to reach out to people that may not understand the impacts that some of their activities have. I think we need to take a bigger look and a closer look. So a bigger picture look at what we all do on our daily routines, and then a closer look at what small things we might be able to change in our daily life to be able to contribute toward slowing the process of this global climate change. People shouldn't throw up their arms and say there's nothing I can do. Well, there actually is, if enough people on the earth understand that it's imperative to reduce, reuse, recycle, to try to reduce the amount of combustion or fuels that are used. Carpool, use public transportation. That's part of it. But other parts would be the things that we choose to buy for our home life. If we choose to purchase products that have been shipped from far away places, that entails use of fuel to ship them. So if we could buy locally, local produce is actually very fresh, and also make some sacrifices. You know, the strawberries in the middle of the winter didn't come from next door, they came from around the world. So give up the strawberries in the winter here in New England and turn to some of the winter crops or the late fall crops that are perfectly fine and local, which would be apples and pears and the different kinds of squashes and such. So there's a couple organizations that I look to for both information, but also see what they're doing for conservation. And that would be the Ocean Conservancy. The IUCN Red List, you may have been familiar with. This is the international agency that determines, based on science, based on evidence, what organisms, what plants, animals are in danger of or vulnerable to extinction. It's all data driven, and research does cost quite a bit of money. So even looking into local organizations that do grassroots citizen research, there are positive events occurring all around the world, and we want to celebrate and support those. It's up to us to really take care of the earth for the future generations.